riding down Highway 61. Sides of the roads all lined with fields, nothing but sunset in the windshield. Feel it as soon as I ride into town. This is where I go to slow down. Miles and miles of soybeans and corn. I'm in the place where the blues was born. About a mile from the big muddy river, place I'll always remember. Cabin on the lake and a fishing pole. Forever here I'll rest my soul. I can feel my worries drift away from being out in the sun all day. No matter where in the world I go, I'll always find home on the banks of that oxbow.
Hey guys, Brad Chappell back at the Crappie Compound in Como, Mississippi on the Crappie Magnet B&M Cornfield Fishing Giveaway Weekend. We're here at Sardis Lake and it is hot, fun, and I'm full. We have eaten really good.
Well, yeah, that's a little suspect.
A little suspect. You know, I got two guys with me today. I'm going to let them do a little introduction for themselves, and we'll kick off today's topic. It's going to be a good one.
I'll introduce John. He can introduce me.
Hey, that's
John Godwin from Duck Commander, also known as Ham Sandwich.
Yeah.
And he's famous for being on Duck Dynasty and a lot of other things. But to us, he's our crappie guy, right? He's the guy that was crappie fishing when nobody else was crappie fishing. So it's just not some famous guy that's out there, you know, talking about crappie fishing. This guy was doing it back in the day. We used to fish 20 years ago, right? We were fishing together that long, so maybe even longer than that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's, you know, he's one of them, as they say down there in Louisiana. He's one of them. He's a crappie guy.
Yeah, okay. That is Jeff Smith, Mr. Sore Lip 'em all. Owns Crappie Magnet, Trout Magnet. Started out with trout and made a little old twin tail bait, just a solid bodied thing that the trout just can't. The first time W.E. tried to get me to go trout fishing with you, and I'm like, how do I? He said, no, you got to go. And the first time I went, I caught 60 trout on 60 cast. Remember that?
I do remember that. Yeah, I do remember that. Yeah.
So I was locked in after that. So with the crappie stuff coming up, he just made that bait bigger, and it was awesome. Back then we were spider rigging, and it is perfect because of the tail, the tip with a minnow, and it's just perfect. And now today, he's one of the top crappie bait companies in the universe.
Wow. Man,
that's pretty big.
I like that introduction right there. I'm glad we did
really
that.
big.
And he's a lovable guy, too.
Oh, wow.
Lovable guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, you know, today's topic is going to be a really fun one, and I've been wanting to do this series for a while now because I have people that they'll email me or come up to me and say, hey, you were talking about a double rig setup, double minnow setup.
Yeah.
You know, it's these different terminologies that us as fishermen, crappie fishermen, we don't think anything about it.
Yeah.
But somebody starting out, a lot of times we kind of talk over their head and they're like, man, I don't even know what they're talking about with some of the words that they're using.
Yeah, you bet.
You know, and the only way to really find out is ask somebody or hopefully watch today's show.
You bet. That's right. That's exactly right. Going on with a guide's amazing because when you go with a guide, in fact, this past weekend, you know, just being here, my son got to fish with Steve Coleman. Who? What?
Legend.
What?
Legend.
Right. I didn't know he was getting in Steve's boat, and I looked over and here Lane's in that boat, and I thought, I don't even know if Lane understands, right? Yeah. The things that Steve Coleman has done. But being in a boat with someone like that, it changes everything because they start saying stuff and it starts sticking. And so, you know, if you don't know some of this stuff, I'd say, you know, getting a guide, there's nothing, you know, shameful about doing that.
No.
Because that is to learn. That is to be with somebody that can, you know, put some of these dots together. Because once you start putting the dots together, you know, fishing is really about a couple things. One is equipment.
Yeah.
The right equipment is crucial. You know, and we take people fishing all the time, and on the first cast they catch a fish. Well, it wasn't an accident. Why was it? We had the right equipment, we located the fish, and then we showed them how to present it. Those are the three things right there. Mm-hmm. Once you get those three things down, the dots start getting connected faster, and you go out and you catch a few fish. And before you know it, those fish start adding up a whole lot more because the dots start getting a lot clearer, and you get, you know, a clear representation or an idea what it takes to catch them. It's talent. Talent comes into play with how fast and how you can locate those fish.
Yeah,
it's there. But when you start connecting those dots, anybody can catch them.
It's, right. I always say, you know, I start out pretty much every day. Now, being a guide, I'm on the water a lot, so I kind of get to take off from what I learned the previous day, but every day I want to kind of start out the day with my mindset, nothing hardcore set down. And people always say, well, how do you locate fish? How do you stay on fish? And you just pay attention. That's the biggest thing to me, is paying attention. And it's from the little things. I noticed this last couple of days at Sardis is not only the depth of water the fish are in or the color jig, and John and I've talked about what sizes to pull and colors. But one thing I noticed this week that's probably a minor detail, but I think would actually make a difference, and if I was really fishing a tournament I would key in on harder, is a small blade. A bigger blade jig head is not catching the amount of fish, for me anyway,
interesting,
compared to a small blade.
You know what? We saw that today. Lane fished a fin spin with this little bladed jig and a curly tail, and he threw it by him and they wouldn't hit it. They would turn on it, but they wouldn't hit it. Right. We're like, that's weird. Well, something in my brain popped up that we were talking about the other day, that I think it was Joel Harris. Somebody said something about how long line they weren't catching them on blades. They were snipping the blades off. So he put a regular jig head on with that curly tail, and I promise every fish we went by after that smoked it. It was like that blade was actually spooking them a little bit.
It definitely can. I mean, it's all these different things that you look at, the Steve Coleman's and
the details.
The details.
The crazier the detail, the more true it probably is.
Absolutely.
Dude Maddox, one of the craziest guys.
You'll need it though.
That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah. One of the craziest guys, you know, you fish with, is Dude Maddox. Have you ever fished with Dude? He's awesome. He's just a legend.
I've heard a lot about him.
Oh, he's amazing. But he said, and he said this before, he said the crazier it sounds, the more true it is.
Yeah.
When it comes to fishing, right? He said, I tell people the truth because they look at me going, that guy's crazy, right? Because he believes you tell them the truth, they're not going to believe, they're going to do the opposite. You go, where'd you catch him? I caught him right over there. He thinks we're lying. They're never going to go right there, you know? Or whatever it is, the crazier it sounds, I mean, a lot of times those things are true. The details. The best fishermen I know, man, when Captain Coleman were bringing minnows from their own place years ago, we were like, what? They were also kicking everyone's tail because those minnows were different, right? And so the details, man, devil's definitely in the details when it comes to catching.
You know, and I'm going to talk about a couple techniques that, if you're new to crappie fishing, you might not know what I'm talking about, and hopefully we can kind of explain it to you, and that way you can look more into it and watch some videos and learn some different things. But I know John and myself are really keen on this technique, and I have people still all the time ask me, what is longlining?
Yeah, they you mean trolling?
Yeah, I mean, out of the front?
No, well, hey.
How would you describe it?
It's out of the back. It's you have your rod racks in the back of the boat, and you control your boat from the back of the boat with the remote control, man's best friend. And you go and you throw out, and your jig size determines how deep you're going to fish. And a little bit, you can do it with your speed too, but it's just going 1 mile to 1.5 miles an hour, pulling jigs out of the back of your boat.
A long ways back.
So yeah, as far just a good cast back and let it go and don't stop.
Yeah, number one rule in longlining.
Yeah.
You never want to stop.
Don't stop. Yeah.
And John kind of hit on it. The long line trolling is controlled by the size of the jig head, the speed of the boat, and even another little factor would be the size of the line you're using. Right. But it's not. We're not using line counter reels. And I have people ask me that question: do you use line counter reels? No, there's no line counter reels. And one of the advantages of longlining for me and my mindset anyway is you're far away from the boat. If the lake's rolling and you have some slap on the boat, you know, that movement of the boat is not going to hurt your presentation.
Right. You're not bouncing.
It's not bouncing up and down and keeping the baits away from them. It might slow them down or speed them up slightly, and sometimes that can actually help your presentation.
Key in on strike. Yeah.
Yeah. So Longlining is not fishing off the front of the boat. It's fishing out of the back of the boat with nothing but jig heads on and going a controlled speed and using particular size jig heads. And I hope that kind of explains a little bit of it.
Comfortable fishing. Sitting in your easy chair, watching your TV.
Chilling.
Got a remote.
Eating a ham sandwich.
That's eating a ham sandwich. It's just going and watching them poles. And everybody can do it.
Yeah.
The only drawback is if you're not good at casting when you catch a fish off your middle pole, then you got to throw your bait back in between your number 1 and number 4.
It's a little tricky.
Yeah.
But you can even set them in the rod holders and pop up the bill and let them roll out that if you're not very good at casting.
Because you're going 1 to 1.5. Yep.
Another fun technique, and whenever I got into crappie fishing, and I think it really throws people off a lot, is jigging for crappie. And I'm talking about using a single pole and fishing standing timber stuff. Yeah. I hate the word jig.
I know. Why do we call it jig? We don't jig it.
We don't jig it.
We don't. Yeah, you don't want to. You'll spook them. Now we even know that more than ever, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And somebody gets in the boat and they're not accustomed to crappie fishing. They're saying, "Well, I've always heard people jig fishing."
Oh, yeah. Silas Merritt Robertson.
Oh, is he?
Oh, he'll pop it. You betcha. Yeah, he ain't gonna
this
still.
far.
Oh yeah. He's jig fishing.
He's a true jig. Yeah.
But that right there to me, it's really dead sticking them more than anything else.
You bet.
It's more holding it still and slightly moving it.
Yeah.
There's no jigging to it.
I will actually go down with my rod tip just to pop.
Yep.
Just to pop, my jig will go. But he ain't really going nowhere.
That's not jigging.
That's dropping. I don't know what it is.
It's jig fishing, but it's not actually. Like I said, that whole word jig fishing just.
Yeah, it's interesting.
It's always drove me crazy.
Yeah. We what we were known for was making a jig for trout. No one jigged for trout in the 90s. It was kind of like, I use bait or you use a spinner, right? And so we started making a jig, and we actually did pop it quite a bit as it went through the streams. But now we fish it more under float. When I got into crappie fishing, this is probably almost 20 years ago, my biggest, deal was, okay, you're jigging it, you're long lining it, why?
Yeah.
And it took me years to start figuring that out. And I tell you, he taught me one because I wasn't a long liner at all. We have a lake that's just a private lake down there. It's pretty shallow. He's like, long line. I'm like, nah, dude, it catches them when I can't catch them with a jig.
Yeah.
There's something about it. It's shallow. The fish go away from the boat. They get back behind you. You catch them. So I would say to people that get confused on whether you're going to long line or you're going to jig, which is a jig is the most versatile fishing lure there is because you can control the weight of the head, the color of the body. There's just, a jig is just the best way to catch almost any species of fish. And so the difference for me is if I'm going to long line is I'm covering water like crazy. But if I know where they are, I'm going to go to a jig and I'm going to put it in front of them and hold it as still as I can. That's the thing that most people don't think. I'm going to try to hold that thing still. And now with live, forward-facing sonar, we've learned that still works. Moving it almost, that's not a normal movement for a fish they're trying to eat. You got to keep it above them and kind of raise it up a little bit. But man, if it hops a bunch, it's just like,
it's not natural.
Yeah, not jigging it. Yeah, you got to.
Get the jigging out of the.
Yeah, that's another good thing. A long lining, too, is because at certain times of the year we get behind the spillway, and we can chunking. I call it chunking and winding. You just throwing, and that's one of my favorites. You're not looking at nothing. You're just back there. They're in there. And you just throwing and winding steady, and you catch them. And I've had people on this forward-facing sonar, they'll have a fish following their bait. Well, first thing they do, stop.
Yeah, absolutely. Wrong thing.
He's gone.
Yep.
You got to play keep away with them, just barely keep it in front of them.
I know talking about that little tidbit is, we'll have people cast to them, and like I said, they'll see the fish start following them, and then they'll stop. Trying to let that fish get the bait in their mindset. Because all live sonar especially is a lot of training your mind even.
You bet. Yeah, you bet.
And I always tell them, if you had a pack of wolves chasing you, would you ever stop or slow down?
That's
and
right.
Good point. Everybody says no.
Yeah.
Why not?
I thought, keep railing.
Keep going. Exactly.
Yeah.
If you don't think you would stop, why do you think a little bitty bait or the bait fish
Yeah,
would
not
ever
natural at all.
stop.
That's a good way to put it.
That's what I'm gonna
Yeah,
use
he's not-
that. You mind if I use
Oh,
that?
definitely not. It's not
Okay.
trademarked or anything. It's good to use.
You hadn't patented it yet?
Not yet.
Copyright?
Another
Do you guys hold your breath when that fish is going after it? I gotta stop doing that.
Yeah.
You know, he's coming up on it. I start holding my breath. I don't know why I do that, but I'm just like, I think if I breathe, he's going to turn the other way. I don't know what the deal is. I'm like, good night. I got to start breathing in between.
Yeah.
I did it all day today. I was like, man, every time that fish turns and you see it going,
Yeah.
lock up on me.
I know another thing that we talk about, cover and structure. What is kind of your mindset when you hear cover and structure?
Well, you get a blanket and now what? If I heard that, my mindset, I would think, and a lot of time, but now we know because we can looking at it. But I would try to throw to the outsides and work the outsides, and I'd try to work over the top, higher than the brush top is, and then I'd try to kind of get down and bump limbs, and that's what I'd call pretty much covering it.
Yeah, you bet. Dude Maddox, the guy we were talking about, for years, I'd go to his house, and he's got I don't know if you ever saw the video with him building the structure he builds.
No.
It's a facility just made just to build. He's got 2,000 plus, structures on Percy Priest Lake.
Wow.
It's unbelievable. We put every Wednesday night in the dark, he would go out and put them out. Nuts, right? Now people can find him. He's not probably too much worried about going out in the dark because that's what he would do. But anyways, from him, I learned, with that structure, whether it's a tree, whether it's, one of his homemade ones, they stay in different parts of that, different times of the year.
Yeah.
So knowing what time of the year it is, now we can just look in it and go, man, they're deep in it. They're on the bottom. They're on the top. They're on the side. We can do it. So it's a lot easier to cover that structure now before. For years, I'd fish with Dude, and we would start in different spots on that. Okay, this is a sycamore tree we put down there, right? Okay, we're going to start on the outside. We know they're going to be on the top. Whatever it might be, and we would just slowly reel it up through that stuff. We'd hit the outside, then now we can look at it and see, so we can cover it a whole lot better. But now with mossback, John does some stuff with mossback. Those types of things, work really well for holding fish, and we can see it even better than ever before how they do it different times of year. Like right now, I didn't see much on structure out here.
Right.
Very few fish were in those trees or on those trees. They were out chasing the shad. They weren't on that structure. But other times of year, knowing where that structure is and where those fish are at in that structure, man, that's it. I mean, that's the whole game.
When we think about structure, and it covers actually a lot of different things. I mean, like a mossback, like a sycamore tree,
Yep.
rocks.
You bet, yeah.
I mean, there's different types of structure, and it's just not one particular thing. It's from stumps in the lake, it's from standing timber, it's to homemade brush piles, it's to artificial
Yep.
Right.
fish habitat or what have you.
Yeah, they'll be on different things, like you say, at different times of the year. Close to the bottom sometimes, up in the top of it at other times. It's weird how that you'd think, like in the hot summertime, they get in the top of it, up close to the surface
That's
instead
odd,
of down.
Yep.
And I know one thing may be thermocline, and that's where the cooler water and the dead water fall, heavier water falls, and the more oxygenated water's up high. I guess that's it. But you'd think they'd try to get away from that sun, but I guess that's what they do, and in that structure, getting in all the shade they can get.
The easiest way, and we'll touch on thermocline because they're about to, I think I seen the small one start setting up at Sardis actually today on my down image. But typically when somebody says a thermocline and how do you identify them, and you always want to fish, like John touched on, fishing above it, you'll see it on your graphs. I mean, it shines like a beacon. You'll have the clear section of water on your unit, and then all of a sudden it'll look really cloudy.
Right.
And that shows you there's actually a thermocline in the lake. So at that point, if you say, all right, it's cloudy from 10 foot down, at that point there is absolutely no use to fish below that mark.
Do not seek the treasure.
Do not seek the treasure.
Bad news.
Bad news.
We learned years ago, especially spider rigging, if you put your baits, your spider rigs, and I'm going to talk about spider rig here in a second too, but if we would put those spider rigs and have those minnows below that thermocline level,
You'd be
Dead.
Really?
changing them.
Dead.
No
Really?
oxygen.
I didn't know that.
Absolutely.
Huh.
There's no oxygen.
The oxygen
down
would
there.
it'd just
It
be like them
kills
being
them.
out of the water.
Yes. They,
Well, that says everything you need to know right there.
yeah, that was the easiest way, especially. I mean, you could find a thermocline really, as long as you had minnows, put them down far enough and you pull them up, you're fishing too deep, that's the
Interesting.
thermocline, and they're dead.
Yeah.
They're going to die every time. Spider rig. What is spider rig? What do you think of, John, when you hear, and how do you spider rig?
Spider rigging is opposite of long lining. It's out of the front of your boat. And you have your rod racks in the front of your boat, 3 to 4, and your poles are sticking out like spider legs. You got them spread out like, and it looks like spider legs going across the top of the water, and your baits are down. And you can you can stop on them as opposed to long lining because you're not on the bottom, and when you stop, because you adjust your depth with how much line you have at. You look on your graph and see where all the fish are holding at that depth. So you put everybody right there. I mean, go 0.3 to 0.7.
Yeah, I mean, even like these guys, and we're going to talk about later on in another episode, power trolling, but some of these guys are pushing them 1 point. I know Les Smith, man, he's like
1.5.
That's crazy.
burning in them. I mean, so there's a lot of ways, but spider rigging typically in the old days, and like we said, Ronnie Capps and Steve Coleman were probably the best ever in spider rigging, and it's presenting your baits directly out of the front of your boat. Another thing that people might not know that's listening is that they're all the same length.
Mm-hmm.
It would not work really well if you had, say, a 10-foot and a 16-foot and then an 8-foot.
Yeah.
You need all your poles across the front. Just like you said about the spider legs, it would look kind of weird if he had different size
Yeah,
legs.
it would.
It wouldn't walk right.
It'd be going around in circles.
Probably so, but spider rigging's
Yeah.
a really good method to wintertime, summertime. It's really probably the most versatile technique that there is because you can go extremely slow, pretty much stop,
Yeah.
and you're fishing directly below the pole tips. And, you might say, well, do you use bobbers and things? There's some guys I've seen use bobber spider rigging, but typically all you have to do is watch your pole tips.
Yeah, because that's why when we designed the Duck Commander series, trolling poles, everybody, different companies had just a little bitty fluorescent orange or yellow. I said, make that sucker 2 feet, because one of my deals is when you're fishing with your buddy, is you're watching his poles too. So you see his pole, you catch his fish. It's like a game. Who can catch whose fish.
That's Les. He always wants to catch yours. He's quick.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Get that fish. You hear him say that all the time.
His
Get that
head's
fish.
on a swivel, boy. He's
Yeah, it
just
is.
back and forth, watching everybody.
Another thing even about the spider rigging is you might think that you only see your poles go down. Especially in the wintertime. I've seen so many times that all of a sudden you'll have all those poles because a spider rigging setup is going to use a 1/4 ounce all the way to some of these power trolling setups up to 3 ounce weights. So you have some kind of weight holding your baits down in position as you're moving along. But if you ever see that pole straightened out, like those fingers just
Yep,
sticking
you bet.
straight out,
He lifted it up.
that fish has lifted it up at that
That's
point,
right.
Yeah.
and you need to set the hook on him.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing that if you're starting to learn how to spider rig is how do you get that fish in with these long poles?
Now
You bet.
that
PhD,
takes
that's a different level,
Yeah,
right.
especially when you got a 16-foot pole.
You bet.
And you're fishing 3 foot deep. Now
You
what
gotta
you
strip
gonna
some line
do?
out really
Yep,
quick.
You got to strip line out.
I think that's probably one of the
Bring that
biggest
pole.
difference between your long liners and your spider riggers. Long line, we want a 16-foot pole, a 14, something very long, get away from that boat because we're going right in front of it. We're going to be where those jigs were here in about 2 seconds. Where long liners, they want to stagger that. They want
That's right.
a 12, 10, 8, 6, right?
Yeah.
Or if they're doing 4 on each side. That way you can spread those jigs out 2 foot apart. Well, our rod holders in the front are doing that, right? So we want to be that way as far as we can. We're pushing them. So we want that 14 or 16-foot pole to get away from us. That's one of the big differences if you're looking at both. Out the back, you don't want all the same length poles. You can't.
Right.
I mean, you're going to be on top of each other unless you stagger them a little bit, but that's hard to do.
You're going to be tangled up, which
You
you
bet.
got to know you're going to tangle up anyway with the fish coming
Yeah.
in every once in a while, but you just got to know that going in. It's going to happen.
Didn't you catch a fish on a pole that pulled out of the rod holder one time?
I did.
Yeah. Did you ever see that? Did you ever see that?
My rod holder was kind of loose, and the fish hit it. And I was talking, and I heard something go, doom. You know how when you pull them out of the rod holder? And I turned around, my rod's going in the water. And I said, that's all of it. It's gone. And we made it, and we started making a turn, and my other line hooked the rod. And I said, oh, I got another on here. And I said, no, because I could feel that resistance. I said, I got the rod, and I reeled it in, reeled, and got it. And there was a fish, and I handed it, because I was trying to get it untangled, and I was fishing with old Kalanka. So I just handed it to him. I said, well, really? And he said, you got a fish on here, which I didn't realize it at the time.
That's what pulled it in, is the fish. Yeah.
And he said, you got a fish on here. I said, well, really, man?
Well, get it.
But it was pretty cool. Man, that's some weird stuff happened. Like I did it one time with Russ Bailey. He'd caught a fish and tangled the line, and I was trying to get the hook out, and I was using 2 hooks. No, I wasn't. It was the other line was out, and I felt, and I went like that, and
you caught it with your hand.
Hand lined it in.
I did. It's on his show, yeah. So that was pretty neat stuff that happens while you're doing that. So don't worry about getting tangled up, because good things happen.
Good things can happen. You know, what is the spawn? Like I said, I want to cover some of these basic things that we know about experienced fishermen, but somebody listening, what is the spawn? Everybody talks about the spawn.
It's that fish getting ready to lay his eggs and, fertilize them and, get ready to get the fry. And so that whole process, man, it controls everything. It's like big buck deer, he's rutting, it changes his motion and where he goes and how he travels. And, that's really, I would say probably one of the things I hear the most is I only fish for crappie in the spring when the spawn's going on. I'm like, man, you are really missing out, because that's such a short-lived window a lot of times. But knowing what that spawn creates pre and post and where they are, man, they're probably feeding more in some of the other times than when they're on that bed. Yeah. Just when they're on the bed, they're more condensed. And I think that's what people find out. They can't catch them. So, man, I caught 30 in that one spot. Well, yeah, you probably on the bed and got a lot of the males that were there, right? So in that spawn, over where we are, the black crappie are coming up, early most of the time. Yeah, mid-50s, late 50s, when it starts pushing 60 degrees. And then the white crappie come around that time too. They come up a little bit later. And so we just watch the temperature, because temperature dictates almost everything with them. The moon phase will definitely do it if it doesn't get warm enough. But if it's not warm, typically they won't start moving up to spawn. The males will come up first and get the bed ready, and the females will come in. And some of the places we fish, I took John a place we wade a lot. Mm-hmm. And
what is wading?
What is wading? Putting those boots on and getting out there and walk around in the trees.
Putting on your duck hunting clothes and going fishing.
That's right. Yeah, that's exactly right. Just walking through the woods and wading. Most of the time we're fishing knee-deep water, just trying to find those beds basically is what we're doing. But where we fish, what we found is over the years, those males are coming in early. I mean, they'll come up as soon as that water gets close a lot of times. But they'll go in and out a lot. Yeah. They'll be gone. They were there the day before, and I know the females hadn't come in yet. So temperature will change that a lot, and that spawn will change. But then the males will stay there. The females will come in. They're really not in the timber from what I've seen. When they spawn out in open water that's shallow, I think they might stay there or stay close a lot more. In that timber, I don't see that as much. I see those females, they don't seem to stick around the bed as much, especially over where we fish. But I think, the spawn can be one of those things that gets everybody real excited, but I'm not saying it's overrated. I'm just saying.
I will.
Okay, good. I'm glad someone said it. I didn't want to.
Well, I know post spawn. I love it better than
you
spawn.
Bet. Yeah.
Because they are munching. And that's when you're going to catch your biggest fish, too. Sure.
My mindset is the spawn's probably the hardest time.
Sometimes can, because that's right.
Because you have a big population let me back that up. There's really no big population in one set area for us. Mm-hmm. We'll have some extremely shallow, then some in that mid-depth, and then we'll have some still in maybe even a pre-spawn pattern where they're out in that deep water. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So during that season, like Ross Barnett, where I've my home lake to say, is our spawn, I know this spring lasted about 2.5 months.
Really?
2.5 months.
Wow.
From early March, really to about mid-May.
Wow.
Yeah, I noticed some black males for a long time and wearing their tux, so we say.
Yeah.
For I was thinking, wow, this is late to be doing,
Yeah.
I did notice that.
Yeah, I mean, these bigger reservoirs, especially, I guess, in the southern states, the spawn for us, I think these fish up here probably spawn a little bit faster than they do in my area anyway, because like I said, the spawn, it lasts from the 1st of March all the way through mid-May.
Wow. Interesting. I guess I see that over there some too. I just don't follow it as much. The only time I follow is when I'm in there wading. But I do know those males are in there for about a month and a half. They're in there a long time. So I'd say that'd be about right for us too. Yeah, I don't think about it that way because it's usually only males that are in there that long. But yeah, you're probably right. That's a long time to be in there too.
And you think, why would a spawn last that long? And to me, that's Mother Nature's guaranteed way of having a really good hatch.
Yeah.
Is because you have some that might not make it, in the beginning and the mid, and so it kind of spreads it out to give you some different age classes in these lakes. In the very case one of them screws up and
where the water falls out, there's all kinds of stuff that happens.
So there's so many different factors. Yeah. So I think a lot of people might say, well, that spawn season, and every lake's different, but a lot of times these spawns last a lot longer than people think. Even like on Eagle Lake and Washington, when I spent a lot of time up there in the springtime, some of those fish would start spawning in mid-January.
Wow. I know the blackfish will.
These are white, big crappie, and typically some of the biggest fish would spawn early. And then all of a sudden, you'd still be catching fish spawning in mid-April. Well, you're talking about
That's a long time, yeah.
Spawn. So, I mean, spawn can really last a lot longer, and it's probably my least favorite time to fish because there's so many areas that the fish are. They're not just like post-spawn. You can just about bet they're going to be pulled back out, going into summertime's my favorite. I love the summertime crappie fishing. I know where they're going to be. They're usually there every single day from right now, 1st of June, really till about the 1st or mid-October. They're not going to change that pattern up. They're going to be in these same spots every day for the next 3.5 months or so.
Absolutely. It does get a little bit easier then. They don't move as much. And I think a lot of people like to fish the spawn because the chance of catching that big female that's bigger than she's going to be bigger any time of year. I understand that, but to me, it's still not, the spawn is not the...
growing up, that's when I always heard people only crappie fish. Did go out when the dogwoods would
That's right.
be blooming.
Yeah. Hey, I remember one time Godwin called me up and he goes, I just had the worst nightmare. I'm like, what'd you have? You remember you called me that time and told me that?
I don't remember.
He said, I just dreamed that all the dogwoods had bloomed and I hadn't been crappie fishing yet. You remember you called me?
That was a nightmare.
That was a nightmare. He said, I hadn't been fishing. They all were bloomed. They all were completely out.
They were gone.
They were already out.
Yeah.
Well, guys,
I love getting on them 6-foot flats during the spawn with them 30 seconds.
And letting them straighten up.
That's fun.
I know there's so many different ways that the crappie fish, and I know we didn't cover even all the terminologies, and we can do some more later on even. But show some in the comments. Let us hear some of the terminologies that you're referring to. Slabs.
Yeah,
I mean,
slab.
It goes on and on with this subject.
Hey, why did you say bobber? Why didn't you say cork?
See?
Why didn't you say indicator? We got all of us. There you go. See, my fly fishing buddies get hurt.
I know another guy called him a float. I don't know what
in the world's going on.
Oh, by the way, some of your easy floats are defective.
Why's that?
They keep sinking.
Hey. Set the hook, John. Set the hook.
That's right. Well, guys, this has been fun. I can't wait to do some more with you guys in the future. Appreciate Crappie Magnet support.
You bet. You bet. We love what you guys do, too. Yeah.
And John's been with me for several times now.
Yeah. It's time to go back fishing. I need to come over to Washington.
Yeah.
Or the rest, go fish it.
Yeah,
I've never fished it.
You're kidding me.
Mm-mm.
Oh, Lord.
I ain't but 2 hours away.
I know.
It's got to be close to fishing Darbone.
Mm-hmm. Fish is really similar to Darbone.
I can't go till the day after tomorrow.
There you go. I'm free. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, Turn your notifications on. Then we'll check you guys out next week. Got Brad Chappell here.
John Godwin.
Jeff Smith, Sore Lip 'em all.
Holla.
About a mile from Big Muddy River, a place I'll always remember. Cabin on the lake and a fishing pole. Forever here I'll rest my soul. I can feel